Today's daf we're going to be learning is Nedarim daf Pei Aleph. It's the daf for Shabbat. Today's daf is sponsored by Judy Schwartz in memory of her mother, Shirley Tidor, Sarah Rezel Bat Mordechai Yitzchak, and Frida Sima on what would have been her 94th birthday. Mishabiyah Melitzat Yosher for her beloved granddaughters, Zivug Hagun Bekarov Mamash. Okay, we're going to get started with our daf, starting from the end of Pei Amabet at the bottom. We brought this contradiction for Rabbi Yosi against himself. Rabbi Yosi in our Mishna said that not to wash your body is not considered inoi nefesh. It's not afflicting your soul, your body. So it's afflicting your body, but not in a way that the husband can annul the vow. And then we brought this Tosefta from Bava Metzia, which talked about if there's a stream that belongs to our city and it goes into the streams into someone else's city. So if it's an issue of our life, there's not enough water for both of us to survive on versus their life, it's in our city, even though it streams into them, we get to take the water first. If it's to feed our animals, we get to get it versus their animals, we get to do it first. Their laundry, our laundry, we need the water, we get to use it first. However, if it's their life versus our laundry, if there's enough for our life, if there's not enough for their life, and we want to take for our laundry, well then, their life takes precedence. That makes a lot of sense. However, Rabbi Yosi had this surprising approach. Our laundry comes before their life. To which the Gemara had asked, Hashta kfisa, now in the last line of Pamabet. Hashta kfisa amar Rabbi Yosi yesh batzal, guf kulo l'koshken. So if Rabbi Yosi thinks that there's so much pain or suffering in not cleaning your clothes, all the more so your own body. So how could he not call the body inoi nefesh? If he thinks laundry is like inoi nefesh, right? It would be suffering of your body such that we can even get water for our laundry as opposed to, and you're dying. Sounds crazy, his approach in general, and it certainly contradicts what he says in our Mishna. To which the Gemara answers, amoraim. Yeah, it's actually not so crazy what he's saying. And there's no real contradiction. Kfisa alima Rabbi Yosi to Amar Shmuel hai irbuvita deresha mati lidei. So now we're going to say that not doing laundry is actually much more severe. How is that? Than actually washing your body, as opposed to what the Gemara suggested before. If laundry, obviously your body, no, it's actually different. And he quotes Shmuel. We're going to start Shmuel. We only read the beginning right now. Shmuel's going to say three things. Irbuvita is a word connoting dirt. So dirt or grime in your head causes blindness. Irbuvita demane, dirt in your clothing, mati ligesha mumita, causes madness. And irbuvita digufa, if you don't clean your body, mati ligesh shichni v'kiva, you're going to have boils and sores, but you're not going to go mad. Now, there's a big difference between going mad, not doing you're having dirty clothes, wearing dirty clothes causes madness. Now, madness, okay, why that is the whole question, but that's what they believe. Cause madness. Madness is something you can't cure, or at least they didn't believe that you could cure. Whereas the boils and that kind of stuff, that is curable. It'll go away eventually, or it can be healed. You can use ointments and stuff, but madness is not something they believe that they could cure. And therefore it's like, right, it's on the same level as losing your life, because your life is now majorly changed and it's pretty, it's troubling. And therefore we're going to say, difference, right? It's very interesting if you talk about mental health, right? This is showing how serious, right? He viewed mental health as synonymous with life. It's very fascinating. Shalchu mitam. Once we're up to this thing about irbuvita, they sent from Eretz Israel the following thing, three things, and then we're going to get off on a total tangent. Hizaru irbuvita. Be cautious of having dirt, okay? Whether it's the Mefaresh here, the Rashi says, it's not Rashi, but when it's quoted as Rashi says, it's all of these things, right? Zaruba, Revita, Bahani, Depreshina, all three that we just mentioned. In addition, Hizaru b'chavuran. Hizaru usually means beware of, which means stay away from something. So if we understand it as that, beware of, some people explain, beware of who you hang out with. It can affect your behavior, right? Hang out with the right people. Some people say hizaru here, and like it's going to be in the next one, is not beware of, stay away from, but beware of how important it is, and you should have a chavurah, meaning you should learn in partnerships. You learn much better when you learn with someone else. Sometimes you make mistakes if you learn on your own and you don't notice, no one catches your mistakes, or you go in depth more, you discuss more. It's a better way to learn. And beware, again, be cautious of, make sure to teach the sons of poor people Torah, because from the sons of poor people, that's where the Torah is really going to come out of. Shene'amal, learned out from a pasuk, Yizal mayim midalyo. The water will come from dalyo, which they translate as dalut is poverty. Shemehem tetzei Torah, because from them the Torah is going to come. Mayim is always an analogy for metaphor for Torah. So from them is where the Torah is going to come from. Okay, why is Torah going to come from aniyim? That is the subject of, on second thought, of Rabbanit Iffy Climber this week. And recommended listening to. You can find it on Hadran's site. There's all different interpretations. Why specifically does Torah come from people who are poor? So one option is to say poor doesn't really mean poor. And poor means, ani is the same, similar to anava, which is humility. Some is to say poor people often have humility because they're poor. And it's the humility that allows Torah growth to happen. So you can listen to on second thought and hear all different range of opinions about this. Why exactly the poor people? One thing that Rabbi Yosi said made me think about this. I think she didn't say this, although maybe I didn't listen carefully enough. But one possibility is that it could be that people didn't want to teach poor people Torah, because why? Well, why would you want to have poor people in your Beit Midrash? They don't pay money. If you remember the famous story of Hillel, he couldn't go to the Beit Midrash that day because he couldn't afford to go in. There was a guard at the entrance taking money, and they didn't want to teach the poor people because they weren't paying money. So this is saying, as encouragement, get rid of those practices, because not that necessarily the Torah is going to come from poor people, but it very well might. Don't exclude poor people from learning Torah, because there's potential among them, just like there is among anybody else, to become a Talmid Chacham. And not specifically that poor people are more prone to becoming Talmud scholars, which again, you can listen to on second thought and hear many different interpretations as to why that is, but perhaps it's not particularly because they're poor, it's just that include them. It was a way of encouraging people to include them by making the statement, using a pasuk to show, look, they can become Torah scholars just as well. Now they ask a very interesting question. If we're already talking about Torah scholars and the sons of Aniyim become Torah scholars, well, why do we have this situation? This is looking around on the street and saying there's lots of big Talmud scholars whose sons are not Talmud scholars. Why is that? So we're going to have a whole slew of answers and different types of answers. Some are going to be preventative. It's to prevent something from happening. Some are going to be punishments that the fathers, okay, and then within the punishments, we're going to have different interpretations, whether and unclear what really it means. Who's being punished? Is it the fathers who are Talmidei Chachamim who did something wrong that are being punished, and that's why their sons aren't Talmidei Chachamim? Or is it the fathers? The fathers are fine. It's the sons who are going off the derech. They're doing things wrong, and as a result, are getting punished. Because they might be learning, but they're doing something wrong, and as a result, they're getting punished, and therefore their Torah is not sticking with them. So, as I said, there's a bunch of different ways of looking at this. So let's start to read. There's a bunch of different answers here, and even within the answers, how to understand them is open to many interpretations. Amar Rabbi Yosi, Shelo yomru Torah Yerusha lahem. So people don't say that Torah is an inheritance. What's the problem with inheritance, right? Let's say you get a lot of money from inheritance, you get rich very easily because you were just born into it, as opposed to someone who works hard to make their wealth. So Torah can't be given over an inheritance like easy. Oh, I was born into it. No, you have to work hard to learn Torah. So we don't want, now who don't we want? Either we don't want their sons to think this is Yerusha, and therefore it doesn't get passed on generally. And that teaches the Torah scholars, that in order to gain Torah, you have to work hard for it. That's the Ron's approach. The Tosfot has a different approach and says basically, I'll read it. If all the Torah scholars had Torah scholar children, people who weren't born to Torah scholars would say, hey, it's clearly not for me. Look, everyone else who's in this system was born into it. So it's obviously not for me, and I won't even try. So therefore, we don't want other people to say it's Yerusha. So that's two different interpretations. Rav Sheshet, or some people say Rav Shisha. It should be Rav Shisha Bered Rav Idi Omer. So these first two are preventative. The first is to prevent people from thinking it's Yerusha. Again, who exactly we're preventing is a good question. The second is Shelo Yitgadu ala tzibur, so that they don't when things are passed over in a dynastic manner, it causes arrogance, breeds arrogance. I was born into this, Magi Ali, I deserve this. So we don't want that to happen. So therefore, we don't pass it on as inheritance. It basically, you have to work hard to deserve it. And many times it's not the Talmud scholars, sons of Talmud scholars. So it's to prevent the arrogance and from them using their position to rule over the people or take advantage. It's that they are abusing their privileges. And because of that, again, is it the Talmidei Chachamim or is it their sons? We don't know. But one of them are abusing their privileges. And because of that, the Torah is taken away from them. Because, right, if either the Torah scholars just think so much of themselves and they're arrogant, and because of that, they're taking over. And because of that, their sons don't get it as a punishment. Or it's that their sons are, because they were born into it and think they're deserving of everything, entitlement, and therefore they're punished. Rav Ashi Omer, they call other people donkeys. What's a donkey? A foolish person. So, right, not a foolish person, a donkey isn't, but people who we call donkeys are people who don't have much seichel. So they say, you again, is it the Torah scholars who look down on everyone else, or is it the sons of Torah scholars who look down on everybody else who's not part of the Torah world and say, you don't know anything, and because of that, the sons are punished. Again, not clear who's being punished for whose sins, but someone's being, the sons are definitely being punished either for their own sins or for their fathers. Ravina Omer, she'em mebrachim b'Torah tchila. They don't make a bracha on the Torah before they learn. So what is this? Most people say we're talking about the bracha of Torah, the 3 brachot we say in the morning. Before we learn Torah, we always have to make sure to say 3 brachot, right? Na'asok b'dvrei Torah, melamed Torah l'Amo Yisrael, and notena Torah. And within that bracha, the Mefarish points out that it says, and we are going to be our tzatzaim and our tzatzaim, all our descendants are going to be lomdei Torah. So because they didn't make the bracha, seems to be, according to this interpretation, the fathers didn't make the bracha, therefore their sons didn't get to gain from what the blessing says, that they're, right, or they themselves didn't get to gain that their sons are going to be Torah scholars as well. However, it really doesn't explain why weren't they making a bracha on the Torah. So, and what does it mean not to make a bracha on the Torah? So before we get there, let's just read. They're going to quote as someone else says, and Ravina is based on something Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rav. Who is the wise man who will understand this? Okay, this is Yirmiyahu talking and saying, who is the wise man who's going to explain to us why God is bringing the destruction on the Jewish people? And then the next pasuk says, right, so first they say, they asked the Chachamim and the Nevi'im, nobody knew to say why was the destruction coming, until God himself came and said, the next pasuk is, Vayomer Hashem, and the pasuk says, who's the one who's going to tell us this? And then in the end, it's God who has to speak, because nobody really understands why. And Vayomer Hashem, al azvam et torati, they left my Torah that I gave them. V'lo shamu b'koli, they didn't listen to my voice. V'lo halchuba, and they didn't walk in the path of the Torah. So the Gemara says, hainu lo shamu b'koli, hainu lo halchuba, to not listen to my voice and to not go in the way of the Torah is really the same thing. Amar Rav Yehuda amar Rav. So now we go back to what we said. We're quoting Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav. She'em mebrachim b'Torah tchila. People didn't bless the Torah in the beginning. Okay. Again, what does the beginning mean? Probably in the beginning of the day. But what does it mean not to bless the Torah? So some people think it means literally they didn't say Berachot Torah. Why wouldn't they say Berachot Torah? Some people say, they were learning all day and learning all night and learning in the morning, and became a part of their regular routine. They didn't look at it as something special, something they need to make a bracha on. Like sometimes when you live it, you think that's a good thing. I'm learning Torah all day, but you have to take a step back and say, wait a minute, okay? I need to make a bracha on this. And what does a bracha mean? So before you eat, you make a bracha. What is it to show? That I understand that, as the Torah says, it's not kochi va'otzem yadi asali et hachayil hazeh. It's not my strength and my ability that I grew all these crops and I have money that I can buy food. No, it comes from God. It all belongs to God, and that's why I'm making a blessing. Same with the Torah. It comes from God. And if I don't recognize that, and which could mean all sorts of things. Either I don't appreciate that God gave it to me, and I think it's all my knowledge and my ability to understand Torah, and it has nothing to do with God. Or I don't, I think that learning Torah is no different than learning science. I love it. It's interesting, intellectual, but I don't differentiate between that and learning anything else. I don't make a blessing before I learn science, even though science is incredibly important. but I don't make a blessing on it, but I should make a blessing on Torah. It's different from science or any other field, whatever it might be. There's all different interpretations of what this could possibly mean. Very interesting in terms of, some people say it's that I learned to do. In other words, my whole goal of learning is, I think that learning is called a hechsher mitzvah. It's just to enable me to do mitzvah. But I don't realize that there's a special mitzvah just to learn Torah for its own sake. Right? It's very interesting to talk about this in the context of people like yourselves, if you're learning Daf Yomi or you're just learning regularly right now, that the idea of regular learning being a value in and of itself, but yet also not just an intellectual pursuit, but something that is something much, much bigger, right? And much greater. And it comes from God, and our ability to learn comes from God, and all of that. So anyway, it's an appreciation, what we call Appreciation Day of learning Torah. Okay, moving on. Isi bar Yehuda, we're now back to Rabbi Yosi. Isi bar Yehuda, lo ata l'metivta de Rabbi Yosi tzalta Yomi. Isi bar Yehuda didn't come to the Shiur of Rabbi Yosi for 3 days. Eshkechei Vardimus bar Rabbi Yosi. Vardimus, interesting name, the son of Rabbi Yosi, finds Isi bar Yehuda, sees him on the street and says, hey, amoraim, my time lo ati amar le midrasha de Abba hatzati Yomi. Why don't you come to my father's Shiur for the last 3 days? Amar le, kitami davucha lo yadana hechi ata. Didn't understand something your father said. I didn't know where he got it from. Interesting that you wouldn't come to the Beit Midrash. Makes sense, right? You go to a shiur of someone's and then they say something preposterous and you say, or you don't understand anyway, not that it's preposterous, but it sounds preposterous. You say, no, I'm not going back to that shiur. Well, Amarle, Lemamar, my kashile, Domigadana Tama. He said, listen, I understand you didn't understand why my father said something. Tell it to me. Maybe I know the reason. Amarle says the following. Hadran, as it says in the Tosefta, as we read the end of yesterday's daf, Rabbi Yosi Omer, Kvisatan kodemet l'chei acharim. Now you can see why Isi bar Yehuda didn't go to shul, the shiur. He said this crazy thing. My laundry, or whoever's laundry comes before their life. How could it possibly be? Krami nalam. What pasuk does he rely on to say such a preposterous thing? Amar le dichtiv. He says, pulls it out of a hat. He says, here, I got a verse for you. Talking about the cities of the Levites, and first the beginning of the pasuk says the cities we give to the Levites are going to be for them to settle. Umigrashehem, that's the area around the city, which was used for fields, will be for their animals, ulerechushan, and for their property, ulechol chayatam, and for all of their chayatam. We don't know yet what this word means. So which the Gemara says, my chayatam. This is what Rabbi Yosi's son says, Bardimus. It comes from the word chaya, animal, right? Undomesticated animals, opposed to behemot, which are domesticated. Chaya is part of behemah. In other words, for this purpose, there's no difference behemah and chaya. Sometimes there are differences, and also theoretically, if it really meant chaya, it would have been behemah, chaya, and rechush. Why does it say behemah, rechush, property, and then it says chaya? It doesn't make sense. Elamai chayatam, chayutam mamash. It must be things for their livelihood. To which the Gemara said, he says, here comes the question though. Pshita, it's obvious. You don't need to say right. Let's say what they're obviously talking about is this water in the fields around the city. The water will be for your sustenance, for you to drink, right? Use. Well, that's obvious. You don't need to tell me that. Obviously, I'm going to use it for that use. It's actually coming to include water for laundry. It's saying in the midrash, if there's water there, you can use that for your laundry. And it calls it chayatam to tell you that laundry is chayatam, is the basically keeping your life going. Okay, without doing laundry, you can't really survive. Very interesting. So there you have his proof. And now we're going to move on. But sticking with Rabbi Yosi, and Rabbi Yosi in the Mishna says, Amar Rabbi Yosi, ein elu nidrei inu nefesh. Right? If you remember in the Mishna, he said, these are not nidrei inu nefesh. So now the Gemara says, Ibayilu. They ask the following question. So not washing, not putting on makeup is not idoi nefesh. It's not suffering. Rabbi Yosi, ma'u she'afer mishum dvarim shebeino lebeina. Maybe though, the husband can still nullify those vows. Why? Because maybe you say not washing, not putting on makeup, jewelry, maybe that's things that are between him and her, right? So maybe it affects the husband, right? He doesn't want a wife who's dirty. Maybe he won't want to have relations with her if she's all filthy. She doesn't put on jewelry or makeup. Maybe it'll bother him. So basically, I should say, right, my husband would be bothered if I did put makeup on, but that's a whole separate story. So now He says, so now we want to know, would he think that they're inui nefesh, or would he not think that? Would he think that they're dvarim shebeino lebeina, or would he not? Does he disagree with the rabbis about the fact that a husband can nullify them, or no? He thinks he can nullify them, but not for the reason the rabbis gave. They're not in the inui nefesh category, they're in the beino lebeina category. To which the Gemara says, Tashma, let's try to learn from the language of the Mishna. Amar Rabbi Yosi, ein elu nidrei inui nefesh. He says, these are not nidrei inui nefesh, which seems to imply, aval dvarim shebeino lebeina havian. But they are dvarim shebeino lebeina. He's saying, he doesn't say you can't nullify them. He says, they're not inui nefesh. So the Gemara says, no, that doesn't prove anything. Because, maybe he's talking to them according to their logic. In other words, like this. We have this a lot of times, but the Gemara suggests things like this. I disagree with you entirely. You think they're nidrei inui nefesh, and the husband can nullify them. I don't think the husband can nullify them at all. Not because they're not nidrei inui nefesh. They're not things between the husband and wife either. But you think they're nidrei inui nefesh. Well, at least admit to me that you're wrong. They're not nidrei inui nefesh. They belong in the other category. In other words, you think the husband can nullify them. I'll agree that unless I don't agree with you, I don't think the husband can nullify them at all. But I do think that you should change your tone about it. I think you're wrong about the reason why the husband can nullify it. I think that you should at least agree with me. They're not really inui nefesh. Those aren't things a person really suffers with. It's really that it will bother the husband. So, but then it doesn't indicate anything about what he himself thinks because he's talking according to them. To which the Gemara says, okay, well then so what is it? Okay, what does he really hold about this? Since we can't really infer it from the Mishna. So we have a machloket. Rav Ada bar Rava omer mefer, Rav Huna omer ein mefer. So Rav Ada bar Rava says he can nullify them because he does think they're beino lebeina. They are affecting the husband. And Rav Huna says, no, he cannot nullify them. Moving now to Amud to hear his reason. Shalom atzinu shual shemet ba'afar pil. This is something the Gemara has talked about before. You don't see that a fox will die in the hole he digs. Foxes dig holes. The hole he digs is his home ground. He dug it, so he won't ever die in it. It won't affect him, right? Like if there's not enough air or something, he knows how to survive in his own hole. What does this mean? In a bit of an unpleasant manner, maybe, but most people think it even has sexual connotation here, that a husband will not die in his wife's lair, so to speak. In other words, even if she's dirty, even if whatever it is, it's familiar to him. It doesn't bother him. It doesn't affect him in that way. He's familiar with her, so close with her that it doesn't bother him. And then sexual connotation is it won't affect him. He'll have sexual relations with her, even if she's very dirty. It doesn't bother him. Okay. So Tanya Kavatei Rav Ada bar Rava. Now we're going to bring a proof for the other opinion that it is dvarim shebeino lebeina. It will affect the husband and his ability to have relations with her, to have a relationship with her even. And therefore, we're going to show that therefore the husband can nullify the vow. This is a support for that opinion. We're going to have a long braita, and it's actually a Tosefta. It's our Tosefta chapter 7. And what we're going to do is bring it, show how it proves it. It's kind of a long Tosefta. We'll go through the whole thing, prove how it proves it, and then we're going to have some questions on the Tosefta itself, 2 questions to try to respond to that, and then we'll end with one other question unrelated to the Tosefta. דברים שיש בהם עינוי נפש, מפר בינו לבינה, בין בינו לבינה, בין בינה לבין אחרים. This is a Tosefta that's basically giving all the rules of what type of vows he can nullify. He can nullify vows that are difficult for her, like no eating, things that don't affect him at all, but they're things that for her are suffering. He can nullify them. Doesn't matter if it relates to him directly or it relates to somebody else. She'ein behem inui nefesh. If they don't have inui nefesh, though, it's not any sort of suffering. Beino lebeina may fail, then he can only nullify them if it has to do with him and her and their relationship. Beina lebein acharim eino may fail, but if it has to do with her and someone else, he can't. Ketzad. So what's an example? Amra konam perot alai harei yafer. If she says fruits will be forbidden to me, he can be mefer no matter what. Konam she'eni oseh lepi abba. I won't anything I do. Your father will not be able to, or my father. Sorry, her own father. Or lepi achicha, or your brother can't benefit, or lefi avicha, your father's mouth can't benefit from it. Lefi achi, my brother can't benefit from it. Shelo atein teven lifnei be'emtecha, I won't give any hay to your animals, straw to your animals, or mayim l'fnei b'karecha, or water for your flocks of sheep, ein yachol lahafil. He can't nullify those vows because those vows have nothing to do with him. Even though it's his father or his brother or his animals, it's still not directly, but it's not anything that's to do with between him and her. That so far wasn't relevant to what we're looking for. Here comes the line. I won't put on makeup at all. We'll deal with that one after, which is I won't have relations with you. Okay, that line about relations is a problematic one, so we're going to put that out of our sight for right now because we're going to get back to it. These, okay, I won't put makeup on. He can nullify. Why? Because there are things between him and her. This already proves it. Because the rabbis think, Tanakama, that it's not dvarim shebein lebeina, it's inoi nefesh. Rabbi Yosi is the one who says it's not inoi nefesh, it's dvarim shebein. And then, what do you see here? It's dvarim shebein lebeina, and he can nullify them. So it must be, Rabbi Yosi holds you can nullify them, because that's what it says here, because he views them as dvarim shebein lebeina. We'll see the Gemara say that after, because right now we're just in the middle of the Tosefta, but it was hard not to explain it while we got there. I won't make up your bed. I won't fix your wine, which basically means, diluting the wine with water. I won't wash your face, hands, and feet. As opposed to before, we talked about, can he nullify? Can't he nullify? These don't need to be nullified. Why? Because they're not even valid in the first place. They never take place because the woman has a responsibility when she gets married to do these things for her husband. Right? Remember, we discussed these. These are things that even if she hasn't, if you remember the famous Mishna in Ketubot, if she brings in maidservants with her, she doesn't have to do all sorts of responsibilities she has in the house because she has other people do it. These things she has to do herself because they create intimacy between the couple. Obviously, nowadays, none of these things are really relevant. Right? Making the bed is not necessarily an intimate action. Neither is diluting the wine. We don't even dilute wine anymore. And the third, washing his face, hands, and feet. We don't really wash our husband's face, hands, and feet anymore. But there might be other things that we could add to this list that didn't exist then. Rabban Gamliel disagrees and says, you know what? Even though it's not really an eder, still he should nullify it. In these cases, if she said those three things, because once someone says it, it's like it's a done deal, even if it's not really a relevant thing. If you say something, you have to keep to your words. So it's better for him to nullify it, and then it's just better. We don't know exactly why Rabban Gamliel says this, but he seems to say you really have to take seriously what you say, even if it's not a relevant statement, and even if it's not going to be an effective statement, you still said it, and therefore you should act upon it, meaning he should nullify the vow so that the vow disappears. Davar acher, a different translation of le'echel dvaro. This is really not so connected, but something we discussed a few days ago, which is mikan lechacham she'em matir nidrei atzmo. Even if you're a chacham, you can't undo your own vow. This is undoing vows, right? Hatarat nedarim, because le'echel dvaro, you can't turn it to chol, but somebody else can. That was the inference, and that's where we said the whole inference for the fact that hatarat nedarim, there's an allusion to hatarat nedarim in the Torah, even though it doesn't say it explicitly. Someone else can do it, but there you have it, someone else, and you can't do it for yourself. So now, that's the end of the Tosefta. Now they go back to our point. Man shaminan damar shelo kol v'shelo avkos dvarim shebeino lebein ahavyan. Rabbi Yosi, right? Who's the one who says it's things that have to do with him and her, or that it's not inoi nefesh? That's Rabbi Yosi. V'katani de mefer mishum dvarim shebeino lebein. Here you see he can nullify them. So there you get this is your proof, Rav Rava, that you can be mefer, as opposed to Rav Huna, who said you can't. Two other things we want to deal with in this Tosefta. Amar v'shelo shamesh mitati yafer mishum dvarim shebeino lebein. What's this case of shalosh shamesh mitati? Isn't that also something she's obligated, right? And then therefore it shouldn't be relevant. So why is he nullifying it? If she's saying, I won't allow you to benefit from having relations with me, one of the commitments she takes on, he takes on to her and she takes on to him. Neither one is allowed to make this statement, and therefore he shouldn't even need to nullify it. If she says, I will not benefit from relationships with you, she's forbidding herself to have benefit from relations. And as Rav Kahana says, Rav Kahana, Hana'at, this we learned in the beginning of the Masechet, Hana'at tashmishi alecha kofal mishamashto. If she says, you can't have relations with me, he can force her and have relations with her. Again, it doesn't mean he can rape her, force her. It means that that's an irrelevant vow. He doesn't need to nullify it or anything because it's part of her obligation. What it means really kofa is If she doesn't agree, well, then it's grounds for divorce. Because they can't stay married if she's not willing to have relations with him. And likewise, the reverse. But if she says, I will not benefit, and this is what we were looking for, why we quoted Rav Kahana, I will not benefit, then yafir, then you should nullify it. Why? It's a little bit circular. The way it works is like this. I won't benefit from relations. That means that we can't have relations because he's allowed to, but because if he has relations with me and I benefit, well, then it's forbidden to me. We don't feed someone something that's forbidden to them. That means we don't insist that I do something that's forbidden to me, which is to have relations with you because I forbade it to myself. So while I can forbid it to myself, but then in the end, he can't have relations with me because it takes two to tango. So therefore, in the end, he must nullify it so that we can stay married. Otherwise, we really can't stay married. Okay, now, after we resolve both that question, now they're going to ask another question, which is bringing in a different source and connecting it to someone in our Mishna. In our Tosefta. Mantana lahadetanya, who is the author of this braita? It says in a braita, dvarim hamutarim, things that are permitted. V'acherim nahagu b'hem isur, but people decided they were going to forbid them. You can't, okay, let's give a perfect example. Kitniot. Kitniot was permitted. But at some point in Ashkenazi countries, they started forbidding. Once it became forbidden, you can't go around and say, it's ridiculous that you're keeping kitniot. There's no reason that you're not eating kitniot on Pesach. It's absolutely ridiculous, right? I'm basically pushing to nullify it, to say it's a meaningless thing that you did. Why? Where do we get this from? That you can't do that. Mishum shenemar lo yachel dvaro. Basically, you took on yourself not to eat kitniot, and therefore it's as if you said, right? You expressed it, whether you expressed it or didn't express it. This is where we learn that if you do something 3 times, a good deed or something, it becomes like a neder. So basically committed to something. And therefore, if you want to stop doing it, you actually have to do hatarat nedarim, they often say. So therefore, if this is learned all out from lo yachel dvaro, because even though really you didn't say, I think this is usher, but you started doing it, it becomes as if you said it. And this is like Rabban Gamliel, we're going to say. Okay, the next few words are taken out by most people, so we're going to skip them. Mane, we're going to skip to the words Mane Rabban Gamliel. This is Rabban Gamliel, because he said again, her words really weren't meaningful because she really can't say those things. But she said them, so we need to nullify them. So same thing with something that you do that's permitted, but you treat it as if it's forbidden. So you're going to have to keep that unless you undo it somehow. Last thing for today, we're going to end with a question by Rava Rav Nachman. According to the rabbis, where does Tashmish Hamitah fall? If someone forbids themselves, the woman says, I forbid myself to have sexual relations with anybody. This is going to be what the Ran says is the nafkamina here, is the relevant practical ramification of this question. Is it things between me and my husband? Or is it inui nefesh? Is it suffering to my soul to say I won't have relations? What's the relevance? We'll get to the answer tomorrow, but what's the relevance? The relevance is if I said that and my husband nullified it, if we say it's inui nefesh, then he nullified the whole thing. But if it's only dvarim shebeino lebeina, then he can only nullify. I said I won't have a relationship with anyone. Now, right now, it's forbidden for me to have a relationship with anyone anyway, except for my husband. So he nullifies it, but he only nullifies the part that's beino lebeina, the part that has to do with him. So he nullifies his option to have. So I can have benefit from relations with him, but not with anyone else. So what does that mean? What if he divorces me? Then my neder would still be there. If it's inoi nefesh, then my neder is not there anymore. He nullified it. But if it's not inoi nefesh and it's things have to do with me and him, then I'm stuck once I divorce him, because then I have a neder that says I'm forbidden to have relations with other people. Obviously, I can always do hatarat nedarim, but hafara doesn't help this. Okay, that's our question. We're left with the question. Answer it after on Sunday. So wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom or Shavua Tov, and we'll meet up then.